everybody. Jeffrey here with another Freestyle Friday. I hope everybody has had a lovely week, and I hope that the weekend treats you well. This past week, I've been meditating on a particular quote by Carl Jung, and I wanted to try to unpack it a little bit on camera and then invite you guys to help me out because I find it to be very perplexing and dense, and it seems like the key to solving a lot of my issues might lie inside this quote. Or maybe I'm just crazy. That's at least partially true. So I'm going to put the quote on the screen, but I will also read it for you. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So I think that this is one of the big Jungian memes that gets perpetuated, and I think that I understand it. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, totally. But the more I think about it, the more complicated my thoughts become. By the way, it's really funny to think about how much I've changed since I was in high school. Because if I had read that quote in high school, I would have immediately rolled my eyes. I was so hyper rationalistic and closed off to anything that had the stench of religion or even something quasi-religious. So I even remember looking at Carl Jung whenever I took AP psychology and thinking, this is just God repackaged in a way, like painted with a psychological paintbrush, which honestly, like that's kind of the point. As far as I understand it, he's trying to locate all of these forces that we project out into the world and find their home within our own psyches, which doesn't make them any less real, as Dumbledore once said. So as for the quote, I think that there are two main things that I'm getting out of it. The first is the idea that you are kind of wandering the world on autopilot, especially when you're younger, and you tend to assume that other people filter information the same way that you do. So whenever I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do for my friends was to draw things for them or to create things for them. I had this one friend in the 5th grade who played a online game with me called Virtual Pets. Not Neopets, but Virtual Pets. Pets.pokemonvillage.com, y'all. I doubt anybody in the world knows what that is. But I had a friend who would play this game with me, and so my way of showing him that I appreciated him was to sit down and create this guidebook, create this manual on, like a standard cheap-ass notebook that you would buy at the dollar store. So I would have like a character page, and I would have a page for all of the items, and I really tried to find ways to express my creativity. I would gift people things like drawings, and it was like, look at what my NE did for you. I shaped this blank canvas into something special just for you. And I was always really hurt when other people didn't do that for me. I didn't understand. I thought they have the same capacities as me. So if they're not giving me the same thing, then they must be viewing me differently. I didn't think of it in terms of maybe they had different skills, different desires, different ways of showing affection or building bonds. And that just never occurred to me. I had the same problem with my introverted thinking. So my idea was that if I could just solve the puzzle of life, then I could go out and I could participate and I could be one of the popular kids. And when I looked at the quote unquote popular kids, I projected onto them that they also had introverted thinking. Not that I thought of it in those terms, but I assumed that they had already solved the puzzle of life, and they then had permission to be cool and go out in the world and know all of the right things to do, which is ridiculous looking at it now, but that's how I saw it. And I even remember talking to a few of the nicer kids who were popular and trying to pick their brains, like, okay, but like, what's the secret? Like, how did you do it? How did you become this person? And I would just get, like slack-jawed responses. So I guess what I'm getting at here is you're unconscious of your primary mode of existence, at least for a while. It's that whole image of a fish swimming in water and not even knowing that there's water there. You don't know the things that you take for granted naturally. And it's only when you go out in the world and actually engage with it and encounter the other, encounter these other perspectives that then create this pole, this like dichotomy, and you suddenly realize, oh, I'm this person and they're something very different, and I'm going to have different challenges, different tidal waves than they have. And by becoming aware of that, by knowing where your consciousness rests in the spectrum, you can see the voids that you're leaving, you can see the things that you're neglecting. I think that's what he's getting at when he says that it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So for me, there have been so many moments in my life where I have just overgathered, overly consumed, and then I look around and my life is literally in disarray, but I'm not living my life. I'm living somewhere in the clouds. And, the quicker you can realize things like that about yourself, the quicker you can take steps to resolve them. Because once you do end up in that hellish place where you suddenly have to reconcile with the things you've neglected, it's just brutal, and you should try to minimize that as much as possible, or at least I feel like I should, because it's just too hard on me to have to suddenly rejigger everything in my life. Okay, so that was insight number 1, this idea that you're not even aware of your default mode of existing. Insight number 2 is that you aren't even aware that there are alternative modes of existing within yourself. There are perspectives and attitudes that you have disowned at a young age, that you have relegated to the shadows. And so these attitudes, these tools are unconscious in a more stereotypical way. Like, this was the easier interpretation of the quote for me to figure out. The idea that I do have all of these unaccessed resources that I've disowned, and if I just become aware of what those might be, then I can use them for my own betterment. You're always viewing the world through your particular prism, and whenever you have a highly charged reaction to somebody emotionally, I think that informs you a bit about these unconscious contents. So if I see somebody who's acting arrogant, I kind of roll my eyes. But arrogance does have its virtues as well as its vices. And if I can locate that perspective within myself, if I can find little moments where I have been arrogant without even realizing it, then suddenly I become aware of this continuum of these poles, and I can decide I'm sitting right here in the middle of the continuum, but actually maybe I want to tweak the slider a little bit. I want to turn the dial. I want to be a little more arrogant. I want to be a little more bold and capable of doing my own thing without being too fazed by what other people think. So yeah, I really think there's something to this message of finding all of the perspectives within yourself and validating them in their own terms and adjusting and recalibrating and integrating and just becoming a more fully blossoming, fleshed out version of whatever you are. So anyway, enough about me. What do you guys think? Is there something in there that I missed? Do you feel like I really cracked the code? Am I going to be a super popular kid from here on out? Talk to me. As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I even more so appreciate that you ring the bell, because as Game of Thrones taught us, bells have a lot of power. All right, guys, I'm out of here. Until next time.